Hey, high school literacy leaders, welcome back to Curriculum Chats. This is DLC Foster Yankee, and in this video, I'll be discussing lessons 6 through 7 in the first section of the Book of Unknown Americans unit. So we will get started with lesson 6. In this lesson, students will plan to write explanatory responses that demonstrate their understanding of the Book of Unknown Americans and the Wanderers by selecting text evidence to support a claim. Students will analyze how themes are developed through characterization and plot in the Book of Unknown Americans and the Wanderers. And they will also plan a piece of writing by generating ideas through brainstorming to develop a claim with supporting evidence. The text for this lesson are the Book of Unknown Americans and the Wanderers. And students will need the Section 1 diagnostic checklist, forming evidence-based claims tool, mentor sentence journals, literary elements and narrative techniques note-taking tool, vocabulary journal, and optional are claims reference guide, connecting ideas reference guide, narratives reference guide, and organization reference guide. So for the lesson overview, we will draft our response to the Section 1 diagnostic. How do authors engage readers through setting, plot, and conflict? So now we'll take a closer look at the 3 activities that make up Lesson 6. Lesson 6 begins with the students reviewing the Section 1 diagnostic checklist and asking the teacher clarifying questions as needed. Next, students create a Venn diagram comparing settings, plots, and conflicts in the Book of Unknown Americans and the Wanderers, and use notes from their literary elements and narrative techniques note-taking tools for the novel and story. To support students, the teacher might allow them to work on their Venn diagram in pairs. If they struggle with setting, plot, and conflict, direct them to the narratives reference guide as needed. In the next activity, students use the Forming Evidence-Based Claims tool to develop their responses to the Section 1 diagnostic by writing the section diagnostics guiding question, how do authors engage readers through setting, plot, and conflict? Using their literary elements and narrative techniques note-taking tool, where they've been taking notes and gathering evidence since the beginning of the unit, to identify the most compelling evidence from the text that helped them respond to the question, and writing this evidence in the Attend to Details row, including page numbers. In the Explain Connections row, they will explain their thinking about how the details they listed connect to each other. And in the final row, they use all of the information they filled in to form and express a claim in a clear, direct sentence. To support students, this is not the first time students have used this tool, so the teacher should be familiar with students who are likely to struggle and prepared to support them, perhaps in a small group. To conclude Lesson 6, students review their vocabulary journals and identify a significant word or words they would like to use in their response to the section diagnostic. They also select the technique they plan to use when writing their response by reviewing their mentor sentence journal. Finally, using the notes on their Forming Evidence-Based Claims tool and their Elements and Narrative Techniques note-taking tool, students draft a response to the Section 1 diagnostic. So we should see a lot of resources out on the students' desks as they are writing this draft. To support students, I thought about creating an anchor chart or just a list on the whiteboard of the writing techniques studied in the unit so far, so students will know the options that they have to choose from. If students demonstrate difficulty with writing, the teacher should determine where they are struggling. Do they need additional support with finding textual evidence or elaborating on the evidence and how it connects to their claim? Or do students need support writing at the sentence level? Some students may benefit from sentence stems, but I would provide them to those students specifically or upon student requests. Otherwise, you risk stifling student creativity and can end up with a bunch of copies of pretty much the same essay. I will also suggest setting a timer for this activity. It deserves at least 30 to 45 minutes, and we should see students writing intently the entire time. And that brings us to lesson 7. In this lesson, students will write responses that demonstrate their understanding of the Book of Unknown Americans and the Wanderers by comparing the text. They will develop a response to the Section 1 diagnostic prompt into a focused, structured, and coherent piece of writing by using an organizing structure appropriate to the purpose, audience, topic, and context. They will also develop a draft of an expository response comparing the Book of Unknown Americans and the Wanderers into a focused, structured, and coherent piece of writing by developing an engaging idea reflecting depth of thought with specific details, examples, and commentary. So, a continuation of lesson 6. Our text for this lesson, we are still using the Book of Unknown Americans, The Wanderers, and bringing back in The Catch, the painting The Catch by Norman Rockwell. And for the materials for this lesson, students will need the Section 1 diagnostic checklist, the culminating task checklist, culminating task progress checker, and this is optional, the convention's reference guide. For the lesson overview, students will revise their explanatory response and practice integrating setting, plot, and conflicts into their own narrative writing. So, picking up where lesson 6 left off, after students are done writing their drafts, they individually revise their responses using the focus questions on the screen. If students need support while they revise their work, the teacher might ask guiding questions based on the Section 1 diagnostic checklist, prompt students to use the appropriate reference guide, and or model how to review and revise the support and development of ideas using a strong and weak model, which means that while students were writing, the teacher was circulating the room and conferring in search of those strong and weak models, or that the teacher has pre-written an exemplar and sample weak model. We definitely want to make sure that we're saving student work samples from this year in order to show next year's students some examples of authentic student writing. After reflecting and revising their drafts, students edit their response to include a periodic sentence. The teacher reviews what periodic sentences are and why they are used. Then students examine their conclusions and revise either the entire conclusion or one of their concluding statements to be a periodic sentence for stylistic effect. Then they review their draft for grammar and punctuation, making edits as needed before submitting their final draft. If students need additional support with crafting periodic sentences, there are a couple of examples in the teaching notes to share with them. For students ready for an extension, the teacher might have them review their draft for other conventions using the convention's reference guide. For the second step, I would suggest having students exchange drafts with a partner and tell students which grammar and punctuation specifically to look for as they revise. For example, and this is an elementary example, they might circle the first letter of each sentence to check for capitalization and place a triangle around ending punctuation. Like I said, elementary, but you get the idea. Revise means to look again, and students aren't very good at taking a look at something they just wrote, which is again why I suggest exchanging that work with a partner. Next, students independently look back at the narrative paragraph they wrote with their group in lesson 1. To recap, in lesson 1, students made inferences about the setting, plot, and conflicts in Norman Rockwell's painting, The Catch, then worked in groups to write a one-paragraph story based on those inferences. So they're going to ask themselves the questions on the screen. How might I make the setting more vivid for the reader? How might I make the conflict more prominent for the reader? And how might I make the plot more engaging for the reader? Let me go down. So this activity is intended to allow students to practice crafting and revising narrative text on their own. It is important to remember that the focus here is on their writing. Allowing for creativity will help them hone their skills without the fear of having a correct analysis of the text. To support students, the teacher should make sure each member of the group has a copy of their group's narrative. In lesson 1, I mentioned having the group member with the best penmanship be the scribe, and then the teacher making copies for the remaining group members. And then just thinking about this activity, I don't see why students couldn't revise their narrative together. The next activity is optional. If time allows, the teacher might have students share their new narrative with their original group and compare the changes each person made. But like I mentioned in the previous activity, I think I would prefer to save some time and just let them work in their groups in the first place to revise the narrative together. Again, teacher's choice. To conclude Lesson 7, students reflect on their work on the section diagnostic and assess their progress toward the culminating task by choosing at least 3 of the questions on the screen regarding the Section 1 diagnostic and responding to them in their learning log. Then they find their culminating task progress tracker, think about the knowledge they have gained and the skills they've practiced thus far in the unit, and use the culminating task progress tracker to add or refine any skills or content knowledge required for the culminating task. They're also going to evaluate how well they are mastering the skills and knowledge required for the culminating task. Finally, students review the central question of the unit. How does perspective shape our understanding of events? And they use the questions on the screen to guide a discussion with a partner or small group, discussing what new knowledge do you have in relation to the central question? What are you still curious about in relation to the central question? And what is the relationship between the question and the text you have read so far? How do the text shed light on the question? How does the question help you understand the text? How has your response to the question evolved, deepened, or changed? And then, last but not least, they write a response to the third question about the relationship between the question and the text in their learning log. To support students, the teacher might facilitate a discussion about some or all of the guiding questions to help students reflect on their completion of the section diagnostic. They might also allow students to complete their reflection in the learning logs prior to the discussion and encourage students to make connections between what they have learned in this section and in the section diagnostic, and what is required to successfully complete the culminating task. Hopefully, teachers are able to devote some CBPL time to looking at these student work samples. And I'm referring to the Section 1 diagnostic as well as the narrative. Moving on to our Cubs for Lesson 6, we have students will know the setting, plot, and conflicts of the Book of Unknown Americans and The Wanderers. They'll understand how authors engage readers through setting, plot, and conflicts, and be able to draft a response to the Section 1 diagnostic. How do authors engage readers through setting, plot, and conflict using the forming evidence-based claims tool? Lesson 7 feels like 2 different cubs in one because I couldn't separate the products. The narrative part felt optional, but it's not because student responses will provide teachers with important data on their ability to craft a narrative for the culminating task. So I had to combine some things. And we have students will know what periodic sentences are and definitions of setting, plot, and conflict. They'll understand why authors use periodic sentences and the role setting and plot play in a narrative, and they'll be able to revise and edit their draft of the Section 1 diagnostic to include a periodic sentence and proper grammar and punctuation using the Section 1 diagnostic checklist, and practice integrating setting, plot, and conflict into their narratives. So that is a wrap for this video. I welcome your feedback and look forward to hearing from you either on Twitter, via email, or in the comments. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe so you never have to worry about missing a video. Thanks for watching.